Welcome into the Commanders Report. I'm your host, Jack Sperry, and we officially have our new defensive coordinator, Commanders Nation, and it is Vikings pass game coordinator, Daronte Jones. On today's breaking news edition of the Commanders Report, I'm going to be breaking down why I absolutely love this hire for the Washington Commanders, kind of break down the core tenets of Daronte Jones' scheme and why I think it's going to work here in Washington under head coach Dan Quinn. Make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. We did a breaking news live show in this very spot here at my home for the David Blau hiring, and then of course I'm on my way home from Canes, and the news strikes that Daronte Jones is the new DC of the Washington Commanders. So even if it's on my day off, whether I'm on the clock or not, whether I'm on vacation, whether I'm sick, if breaking news happens for the Washington Commanders, my promise to you is I will be getting you guys in-depth content on the Washington Commanders and whatever that news is. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Greatly appreciate all of your guys' support. All right, so let's dive in here on Daronte Jones, the new defensive coordinator for your Washington Commanders. And I said it earlier on today's show that we actually put out a couple hours ago, guys, that Daronte Jones, once I heard that they were interviewing him, he became my new number one defensive coordinator target, even above Raheem Morris, because he runs the Brian Flores scheme that they've been running in Minnesota over the last 3 years and have gotten, amazing results with. I mean, over the last 2 years, the Minnesota Vikings defense has been the number one defense in the league according to EPA per play. And, this defense is as modern as you are going to find in the National Football League. Like, of course, Robert Saleh runs a modern scheme. Mike McDonald runs a really modern scheme. Chris Shula with the Rams runs a very modern scheme. There's a lot of different teams around the league that do a lot of creative stuff and all that, creative, split safety stuff that we're seeing dominate the National Football League now. But what you see in Minnesota is you're seeing even more creativity than anywhere else in professional football, in my opinion, on the defensive side of the ball. You're seeing, a lot of very creative blitz looks with the way that they match quarters principles along with sending extra pressure. They have very exotic cover zero pre-snap looks, drop out of it, send all seven to the quarterback. They mix up their match rules. Sometimes they'll split the field. They're playing quarters match rules to one side, palms match rules to the other side. They'll play cover six. They'll drop out of their cover zero looks to play Tampa 2 or cover 3. And then what Daronte Jones brings to the table in particular, and this is why I love this hire, guys, and why I think Jones is one of the up-and-coming defensive minds in our sport today, is Coach Flores himself credits Jones with the incredible pre-snap disguises and post-snap rotations that the Minnesota Vikings defense has become known for over the last several seasons, where sometimes you'll see the Minnesota Vikings change their pre-snap look 2 or 3 different times before the ball is even snapped, and then sometimes they'll do a post-snap rotation off of that as well. So the coordination that Daronte Jones has had in terms of these pre-snap disguises, this pre-snap movement of the defense to kind of make it look as ambiguous as possible to the quarterback so they have no idea what kind of coverage they're going to be getting, and then they roll to something that's advantageous for your defense. And I think that this is the style of defense that can get the most out of what I expect to be, maybe not the most talented, not the most talented Washington Commanders defensive roster moving forward. I mean, they're going to have to completely rebuild this defense. Bobby Wagner's going to be out the door. I think Frankie Louvu has a chance to be shown the door as well. Deron Payne could potentially be traded this offseason. A lot of probably both starting safeties might need to be replaced. Like, there's a lot of new that is going to be happening on this Commanders defense from a personnel standpoint in future seasons. And I think that this style of defense, if it's coached properly and the players really take to it, I mean, this could be, a big floor raiser and ceiling elevator for the Washington Commanders as they look to rebuild this defense over the next several years. Now, before I get into the rest of this video, I want to give a quick word to our sponsor today at Prize Picks. The big game in Santa Clara is almost here between the Patriots and Seahawks, and there's no better way to cash in during America's biggest sporting event than with Prize Picks, where it always feels good to be right. And since the big game is right around the corner, that also means it's your last chance to get into the football action before next season. So close out the year right with Prize Picks by getting $50 instantly in lineups after you play your first $5. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. All right, so now I want to actually share with you guys a quote from Brian Flores himself, the defensive coordinator of the Minnesota Vikings, about Daronte Johnson's role in the Vikings defense over these last several years as the DB coach and the pass game coordinator there in Minnesota. Flores said, quote, "A lot of that credit in terms of the pre and post snap rotations go to Daronte Jones, our pass game coordinator. He spends the lion's share of the time with the group, and that's where a lot of the think tank kind of disguises show up. It's, hey, what are we doing on this one? And, DJ will kind of fill me in." So he is kind of behind some of these mastermind kind of pre-snap and post-snap rotations that we have seen from the Minnesota Vikings over these last several years. And I think, this is one of the premier DC candidates around the National Football League this year. Like, he was right up there with Christian Parker, who ended up going to the Dallas Cowboys. He was right up there with Jim Leonard. He's right up there with Raheem Morris. He's right up there with the top DC candidates in this cycle. And like I mentioned, guys, I think the thing that gets me most excited about this defense and this defensive scheme is that, it creates so much confusion, puts so much pressure on the quarterback. It forces quarterbacks to make quick and correct decisions, or else they're going to throw a lot of interceptions. They're going to take sacks. They're going to take negative plays that end drives for that team. And obviously that means good things for the Washington Commanders, getting the ball back in the hands of Jaden Daniels and David Blau's offense. And, what I really love about this hire is it just completes a really good coaching search cycle for Dan Quinn and Adam Peters, in my opinion, man, because you guys know that I'm high on the David Blau offensive coordinator hiring, not only because I think David Blau is one of the up-and-coming offensive minds in our sport, but also because he's been in the building. He knows the previous system under Cliff Kingsbury, and he's been here every step of the way at Jaden Daniels' development. So he knows exactly where Jaden's at right now. He knows the language that Jaden already knows about, and he can make the transition to more of an under center Ben Johnson style of offense easier for Jaden Daniels. And then you look to the defensive side of the ball, a group that really needs a complete and utter overhaul. You have a scheme now with this Brian Flores style scheme that has elevated a lot of players in that Minnesota Vikings defense that were not seen as like high level contributors or players before entering this defense, and now are seen as some of the best defensive players in football. Guys like Jonathan Grenard, Van Ginkel, Andrew Van Ginkel. Then you got Josh Metellus. It gave Harrison Smith one last life here in the National Football League before he is going to be heading towards retirement this year. Blake Cashman, later round draft pick. Ivan Pace Jr., undrafted guy, turning into a stud in Minnesota's defense. Jalen Redmond, no one had even heard of him before. He was a UFL player, balling out in Minnesota's defense. So this is the style of defense, guys, that can elevate players to levels that, you haven't seen from them before. And honestly, now that I think of it, I said earlier in the show that Frankie Louvu might be on his way out, but knowing Frankie Louvu and how good of a blitzer he is, and knowing how much this Brian Flores defense blitzes, Flores has been blitzing at, close to the top of the league rates for a very, very long time now. And I would expect Daronte Jones is going to be bringing that similar, very aggressive style of defense here to Washington. And, Frankie Louvu is an awesome blitzer. So if they want to keep him around for another season, I think this is the style of defense that Frankie Louvu could thrive in potentially. And it's going to be very interesting, man. I think after I'm done recording this video, I'm going to take a good look at the Commanders' defensive roster and see who fits where in this defense, who's going to be a good fit here. And honestly, the first thing that I look at as the quarterback position, where you've got Trey Amos and you've got Mike Samerstill, two guys that are really good in off coverage. And this system plays a lot of off coverage. Okay, they're very aggressive in terms of the pressure they put on quarterbacks, but they play a lot of off coverage. And I think that fits the skill set of Trey Amos and Mike Samerstill. If you want to go with those guys as you're starting outside corners, I would expect them to go out and try to acquire a big nickel type of player. Whatever that looks like maybe they make Will Harris the next big nickel here. Maybe they move Quan Martin to the nickel position because, Josh Metellus plays a very important role as that third safety in this, Minnesota Vikings, Brian Flores style defense. And you need athletes at linebacker, and we certainly have a couple of athletes here in that room here in Washington. So I'm honestly really intrigued about, Tyler Owens and Kane Madrano and some of these big time athletic players, like what they could do as hybrid players in this defense that moves chess pieces around and is very creative and all these different things. I can't tell you how excited I am for this hire. I think it might be the best hire that Dan Quinn has made as the head coach of the Washington Commanders. And honestly, I think it's one of the better hires of the coaching cycle, period, at any coordinator spot. I really am that high on this hire for the Washington Commanders. And, defensive football for the first time in years is going to be fun again here in Washington. I mean, how about that? I mean, after dealing with, the soft, squishy, off coverage zone, super soft defense of Jack Del Rio and Ron Rivera, we're going to be having, one of the most aggressive defenses in the National Football League. And we're going to be at the cutting edge of defensive schematics here in Washington with Daronte Jones leading the way. So I can't tell you guys how excited I am for this hire. I can't wait. I think I'm going to do a full-blown scheme breakdown for you guys on the channel once I'm back in studio tomorrow. This is my favorite style of defensive scheme in football right now. So I can't tell you how excited I am for this hire for the Burgundy and Gold. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. I greatly appreciate all of your guys' support. Make sure you guys, again, click that subscribe button because we're just getting started here this offseason on the Commanders Report. So if you don't want to miss anything on the Burgundy and Gold this year, make sure you click that subscribe button right now.